given a voicemail, given a text message, it can almost immediately recognize there's a problem, right? And then it's getting it fed back into the network to find the source and stop. So, as long as you have good statistical samples of these behaviors, once you see one, you don't need to see a million of them. You see one, you see one call, now you know it's a deep fake. You see one voicemail, you can actually take action. So I think it's getting a sense of urgency among everybody here to take action.
Alex Quilici, welcome to our show. And for this fun conversation, I'm excited to engage with you on your background and your history and the UMail and what you're doing today and talking everything about communication. I mean, you've been in this space for more than 2 decades. You're obviously highly technical. You're with a PhD in computer science and AI, but also your background as vice president within AOL and having spent, I guess, 17 years now at UMail. So you probably are one of the most knowledgeable people in the world on email, phone calls, communication, and the security around it, because that's obviously what you do. So I'm really excited to just learn from you over these 20 minutes and try to get as much information that I can and learn from. So again, Alex, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully I can live up to all that.
I'm a very determined that you will. So Alex, take me back for a second to as you got started in voice over IP and AOL and communication. Well, what does this mean to you? How did you get here?
So I got here by accident. I got here because I was sitting in a store before mobile devices were really common, and I didn't want to overpay for a mountain bike. And I thought, I wish there was a number I could just call and say, specialized, whatever the bike was. How much is it on Amazon? And so we decided to build that. And we built what turned out to be one of the first voice portals where you could say, where's the nearest Chinese restaurant, et cetera. We did that 25 years ago. That required no one about telephony to do it at the time. We created a 1-800 number you could call, had cages of servers to answer calls, and just been one thing and another since then. Fortunately, AOL liked what we did. They built it. We became a voice mechanism for getting to AOL email back in the day before even BlackBerries were getting really popular. And I'm just stuck out this area since then.
Wait, what happened back there? So you created a service in which people were able to call a 1-800 number, ask a question and how did it work? How did it actually run?
So back then we actually had servers that were answering the phone call that had dialogic cards on them. So it's hardware cards that could answer the phone calls. The phone calls were routed over the public switch telephone network to those servers in the same way they would have been routed to, say, a voicemail box at a carrier. And we just built some really smart code that managed the servers, found information on the internet, built parameters, and tried to answer questions. And so it was sort of like a vision for Siri without Siri. And we only got started on it.
Wait, and it spoke back?
Yeah, it spoke back using text to speech, again, using hardware cards to generate it. It almost feels insane, but it was a predecessor of Siri in a lot of ways. And when it was part of AOL, it had 1 million people paying $5 a month to use it after a couple of years when AOL bought it and scaled it up. So we built a real business on what was essentially a voice way to get to your email, a voice way to get to your voicemail, and your voice way to get to a few other pieces of information like restaurants, and I think movies were in there. I can't remember anymore.
Wow. And then you led this within AOL afterwards. That's what you were doing as vice president.
Exactly. I was part of the team that was trying to scale this out through AOL and do other products. We did a free phone number product at AOL as part of AIM. For those of you who can remember AIM as, kids, as a messaging service. And after a while, I was there for a while. It was really fun working with that sort of audience, and decided to go do something else after that.
All right. So after that, where did you end up going to?
So I ended up going to this company called UMail, which was really fledgling then. It was a couple guys who built a little voicemail service that had a couple of cool features. One was it could play an out of service message to a caller based on the phone number. So you meet someone in a bar, you decide you don't want to keep talking to them, hit a button, now it's going to play out of service when they call. And it had another little feature that was a personalized greeting. So each person who called you could get their own greeting. So mom gets a greeting, your friends get a greeting, etc. That's how UMail started. I ended up as an investor and a board member, and then kind of found myself running it after a while. And our goal was, hey, let's replace voicemail that the carriers have with something we could build that's way more interesting than what even these two guys had sort of created. We tried, carriers don't move quickly, money does move quickly, and we ran out of money and said, okay, we better go do something else. But it turned out we had 1 million people using our BlackBerry app, which we just built as a proof of concept. From there, we decided to grow it in the voicemail space and eventually realized nobody cared about voicemail. What they cared about was playing out of service messages to phone numbers they don't like. It used to be the failed hookup, the person you got to know and didn't want to know anymore. It moved to robocalls. It moved to people, all of the email users blocking the same 1-800 number, the same 312 number. And so then about 2015, we'd grown the base pretty well, but we said, this is no future here, but the future is in protecting people. And that's how we got into what we do today. We wanted to block calls. We wanted to figure out what voicemails they were getting and how to label them so you knew if it was a spam or a scam, and generally allow people to communicate more safely.
Incredible. Can you share with me a little bit about the evolution of spam, social engineering, phishing, and real-time communication? So I know I grew up knowing that my grandmother was getting phone calls to buy cruises, and so I remember hearing constantly warning wellderly and people that are perhaps less equipped to go and check these things for themselves, whether it's a good decision. Is this really where it started, or what was the space and how did it evolve?
I think it started with people trying to do scams that they would have done in person to someone or through the mail, through the phone. Right. So there were lots and lots of different scams. A cruise ship one, there's you've won a big prize. All you got to do is, go somewhere and wire money to someone. I mean, it's been very consistent. What's changed is the level of automation. So the fact that you can do a huge volume of calls or text messages these days at very low cost and get an enormous number of targets. That's relatively new. That's an evolution. I think how they work and the targeting, the data sources that are there from breaches, for example, or just even public data brokers, it's easy to buy a list of phone numbers of Alzheimer's patients over 80. If you want a target list, there's a target list. And so you just call those people. You don't have to call everybody with your scam. So you see more calls, targeted calls, and now you're starting to see AI as part of this whole thing. So AI cloning voices. So Joe Biden's telling me I won the Publishers Clearinghouse. It must be real. So, I mean, that's a silly example, but we're seeing lots of really interesting use of AI for bots. So even if you answer, you're not talking to a person, you're talking to a bot. And the bot's qualifying you, getting you started, and then transferring you to a person. And so it's just automation and intelligence aiding the scammers all the way through.
Right. I heard somebody from a cybersecurity venture capital fund mentioned the other day the term spray and pray, right? Their ability to now execute these spam calls or social engineering or phishing efforts at large volumes due to the emergence of AI. And you're talking about robocalls and the ability to automate the calling, and we've had text to speech, which now obviously sounds more and more like human. How do, I guess, deepfakes fit into this from your perspective? So I guess deepfakes obviously are the cloning of somebody's identity. So it's not a random voice that you hear, but it's actually a voice that you trust.
So the really interesting thing is that people are at risk of being deepfaked because they use voicemail. So if you have a greeting, hey, you've reached Michael, I'm really busy, I'd rather you text me, but go ahead and leave a message. That's enough, as you know, to do a decent quality voice clone. So people just set up their voicemail. Now they've got the possibility of voice clone. With live voicemail, you've got the possibility of an AI-generated interaction that's being transcribed until you answer. Then you press 1, and now it goes to a person. So AI and deepfakes is affecting the newer products that people are using, right? The voicemail people are used to using, the greetings, the live voicemail. It's all extremely dangerous because of the deepfakes, and we're starting to see them scale.
Is this something that you think is already happening, or is this something that we're still gearing up for the future? Because there's a lot of people who say...
It's definitively happening already. So there was a deepfake of Joe Biden in New Hampshire where the call went out to a bunch of Democratic voters saying, don't bother going to the polls now. Save your vote for the general election. Don't vote in the New Hampshire primary. It was Joe Biden's voice, robocalled to a bunch of people who then it had an impact, right, on the number of people who went to the polls. So that's already happening. There's a congressman in Pennsylvania whose constituents are saying there's a deep fake of him asking them to donate money to a fake police charity. So deep fakes are already out there at, with celebrity or known people. We're starting to see, we've seen for a while, but AI generated voice messages saying, Dad, I'm in trouble, those kind of things, the grandparent scam, not necessarily a full interaction with the family member, but enough to get them to call or text a number. It's happening and it's just going to scale. Like we're kind of unfortunately right before this big wave of this stuff that's going to happen. And our prediction is that by this election, we're going to see all sorts of stuff. Both sides, everywhere, local, national, doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And so far we're talking about consumers and the, I guess, real-time communication channels of consumers. Is this also a problem for organizations or enterprises, or do they have already existing defense mechanisms that cover that? And really the problem is the consumers.
Well, I think we know that the organizations aren't defending against smishing and phishing successfully as it is, and adding a layer of intelligence will just make it harder for them. So as the scammers sound like the CEO, and we all know, we've seen demos of it, we know some of those are out there. If you get a call that sounds like your CEO saying, hey, I really need you to go buy 10,000 of gift cards for this event, get it sent here, who's going to question it, right? And so it's going to be, I think enterprises are way more vulnerable to this stuff than they think they are.
I 100% agree with you. And so let's talk about, UMail and how you see the space evolving, because what, we're looking at, if we're putting as a mission statement, let's create a situation in which people are secure from spam, phishing, etc. What does it actually entail? What do we need to do? Because you're saying it's happening now. So what's the resolution?
So the way we look at it is, we have a nice app that helps protect people when the calls and texts finally get through the network and land on somebody. But that's too late. What we need to do is stop it right at the start, which is go after where the calls and texts and these phishing and phishing scams originate. And so we've already started moving in the direction of helping carriers understand, here's illegal, unlawful, fraudulent traffic that you're putting on the network. Your customer is making these calls. And we use our UMail audience as a sensor network to detect that stuff and have commercial products for carriers where we can show them, here's all your illegal events so they can take action. Same with imposters. If there's an imposter pretending to be a bank, it's too late to try to stop them at an account takeover that resulted from the smishing or phishing attempt. You really want to figure out where those are coming from and shut them off and make it so hard to get any traction that people go into some other business. And we're putting a lot of our energy there. We love the consumers. They're great. They give us data. But the future is being able to notice what's happening quickly enough to stop it from taking off.
And what is the response from the carrier side? So the large telcos that are now all of a sudden finding themselves in the middle of all of this, how are they reacting?
I think there's different kinds of telcos, right? So the T-Mobiles, the AT&Ts, Verizons, they're trying to stop illegal traffic from hitting their users, right? They want to block. You see spam likely. You see them making attempts. The more interesting part is the wholesale part of the network. That tends to be the part of the network where the calls come on and they sell to businesses, and the bad guys are just another kind of business. That's where I think that they're still trying to get their arms around this problem and what does it mean, right? A lot of the carriers think they're really clean, but they actually have a decent amount of illegal traffic, even though they're trying not to. There are other carriers out there that we see, the FCC and others, shutting down that pretty clearly didn't have a lot of legal traffic. They existed solely to defraud people. So I think we're seeing, though, that there's a big movement now to try to stop the problems at the source and have the security guard where the calls are being made, not where they're ending.
Right. I mean, and I can only imagine, how big of a task it is to take a situation. I don't even know how many phone calls there are. Maybe you do in the US, let's say for a day, and the ability to, without friction, with relatively low cost, to be able to identify this illegal behavior and then stop it with low false positive rate, because you don't want to create friction, right? They're highly competitive with each other. And we know that, people don't like when there's friction in their experience. So, and all of that has to happen very quickly, because as you're saying, it's happening now. So it's not like we're planning for 5 years in advance. We're planning for end of 2024.
So you're absolutely right. And I think the key is there's technology now. I've seen lots, we all are working on different aspects of it, but given a call, given a voicemail, given a text message, it can almost immediately recognize there's a problem, right? And then it's getting it fed back into the network to find the source and stop it. So, as long as you have good statistical samples of these behaviors, once you see one, you don't need to see a million of them. I mean, you see one call, now you know it's a deep fake. You see one call, one voicemail, you can actually take action. So I think it's getting a sense of urgency among everybody here to take action. And so I think that's a challenge. Like if you've been a carrier, your whole job has been to make the call go from point A to point B. Now you're being told, hey, you need to stop a lot of these calls, or some of your customers are bad. That's a really huge change in mindset and operations, and it can impact revenue, right? It can impact your business in negative ways that you may not even know. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think it's where a lot of this stuff is going to have to, the battle's going to have to be fought.
And are you optimistic that there's the right people in place to give the effort and the understanding that we need to create these solutions, and even if it has some impact on the short-term revenue, this is something that has to happen? What's your stance on sort of the optimism around how equipped we are to deal with this?
I think the technology is there, and it's the will and the ability to roll it out that's going to be the challenge. I think businesses are getting educated. I think this is one place where the government is playing a really interesting role, where the FCC is basically telling carriers, you can't just look the other way and say, I didn't know it was bad. You're going to be partially responsible. So I think as the notion of we're partially responsible permeates the space, you'll see more action. So I'm pretty optimistic. I don't see it as a solved problem, though, or a super solvable problem in the short run. It just gets better and better over time. Make the bad guys work harder, and there'll be less of the scams and damage. But it's in the billions or tens of billions of dollars a year in terms of phishing damage, depending on who you talk to. Tens of billions of dollars a year is a big number.
That's a big number.
And so we can just keep reducing it 10% a year for some period of time. That's my optimistic take.
And I think it's not just the dollar amount, but it's also the impact associated with the dollar amount. Because as what is $10 billion a year of losses in phishing represents? It represents potentially millions or hundreds of thousands of people that now lost trust in the system. And you have the remaining billions of people who are exposed to this content, to this experience through the news and through social media, which are now saying, wait, can I trust what I'm hearing? Can I trust what I'm saying? And so it sounds like just even the second order effects of this are quite disastrous.
It is, and I think you make a great point. It's not only financial. It's actually there's been somebody who was killed recently over a scam, right? In Ohio, an elderly man got a prison scam, and the Uber driver is coming to take money from him to go to give to the scammer, who had no idea. He shot her, right? Thought she was part of the scam and killed her. I mean, that's the worst possible outcome of a scam. It's not just he lost money, but somebody died. And so these things are actually really dangerous, right? It's like, why you tell your kids never get in a car with strangers. Now it's almost like, don't talk to strangers, right? Stranger danger is a phone call. It's a text message. I mean, it's insane, but adults now worry about stranger danger. It's what you told your 3-year-old or your 6-year-old. You're now telling your 40-year-olds and your 80-year-old mom, right? It's
absolutely, completely agree. Alex, what's next for UMail? What are you excited about?
I'm excited to roll out what we've been rolling out. So we've rolled out to over 20 carriers that are using our product. There's 3,000 in the US alone who could. I think that's a great market. We have 5 enterprises we're now protecting their brand. There's clearly hundreds of those we could do. So ours is just, let's go attack this market. We can do a great job and get our product out there and see how much of a difference we can make. We're in it for making a difference.
And 3,000 carriers, you said?
3,000 wholesale carriers in the US. We know that because there's a database you have to file if you're a carrier called 499 filing with the FCC. Over 3,000 entries, maybe even closer to 4. Some are real, some are a guy in his basement, with one server, but 3,000 carriers who are in business as being a carrier from, at least some customers, some revenue, some calls. It's a lot.
Are these all operating under telecommunication technology, or are some of them operating under just the cellular service and the internet? Is there a distinction there?
No, it's not really a distinction. A lot of them are internet-based, right? So there'll be a carrier that specializes in wholesale service for hospitals. So they'll provide the phone service for the hospital and get them good rates. There's carriers that specialize in taking traffic from point A to point B cheaply. Carriers that specialize in being gateways from traffic coming from different countries overseas. There's all sorts of carriers here. And some just try to be low-cost providers in a particular region or to a particular industry. So, there's probably 300, 400, 500 carriers that really matter out of that big batch, but we're at 20. That gives us some room to run, and we want to run and help. Because the more we get at these carriers using our stuff, the fewer these calls are going to be on the network.
Absolutely. Alex, I want to wish you best of luck with UMail. I want to thank you for this amazing conversation. I learned a ton, as I always do. So I really appreciate it. And I'm wishing you best of luck. And as much as I'm inspired by your professionalism and your knowledge in the space, I'm just as inspired by your commitment to what you're doing for the last more than 2 decades. And so I think it speaks volumes to your excitement in this space, your commitment to making a large impact here. And it pretty much sounds like you started a space and now you're helping secure it. And so it's really great.
Well, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun and you asked great questions.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.